For decades, investigators struggled with crimes that seemed impossible to solve. No witnesses, no suspects, and no clear evidence. Families were left in the dark, and killers walked free. But then came a breakthrough that changed everything. DNA technology, from cold cases that haunted communities for generations, to infamous killers who thought they would never be caught. DNA became the silent witness that never forgets. Today, we count down 5 of the most mysterious cases that were finally solved thanks to DNA. Number 5. He was known by many names: the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, and finally, the Golden State Killer. Between the 1970s and 1980s, a masked intruder terrorized California. He broke into homes, tied up couples, and committed brutal attacks that left entire neighborhoods in fear. By the end of his spree, he had committed at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries. For decades, police had no leads. Thousands of tips poured in, but every trail went cold. The case seemed destined to remain unsolved. But in 2018, everything changed. Investigators uploaded the killer's DNA from crime scenes into a public genealogy database. From there, they built family trees, tracing distant relatives back through generations. The evidence pointed to one man, Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer who had managed to hide in plain sight for over 40 years. When confronted, DNA confirmed the match. After decades of terror, the Golden State Killer was finally unmasked. Number 4. In 1984, 9-year-old Christine Jessop disappeared from her home in Ontario, Canada. She was last seen playing outside after school. 3 months later, her body was found in a wooded area miles from her home. She had been assaulted and murdered. Police quickly arrested a neighbor, a young man named Guy Paul Morin. Despite weak evidence, Morin was convicted and spent years behind bars. But he was innocent. In the 1990s, DNA testing proved he was not the killer, and Morin was finally exonerated. Still, the question remained: who had really murdered Christine? It wasn't until 2020, over 3 decades later, that investigators used new DNA techniques to find the truth. The evidence pointed to Calvin Hoover, a man who had been a family acquaintance. Hoover had died in 2015, but the DNA made it clear: he was Christine's killer. After 36 years, the truth finally emerged. Number 3. In 1991, high school student Sarah Yarborough drove to her school in Washington State for a cheerleading event. She never made it inside. Her body was found on the school grounds, brutally attacked and strangled. The crime shocked the community. Police collected DNA from the scene, but in 1991, technology wasn't advanced enough to find a match. The years passed, and the case went cold. Nearly 30 years later, investigators turned to genetic genealogy. They built a profile using DNA, tracing family connections until they identified a suspect, Patrick Nicholas. In 2019, DNA confirmed he was the killer. Almost 3 decades after Sarah's murder, justice was finally within reach. Number 2. In 1988, 8-year-old April Tinsley was kidnapped while walking home in Indiana. Her body was found 3 days later in a ditch. The community was devastated. Then came an even more chilling twist. For years after the murder, the killer taunted the town. He left disturbing notes, threatening other children, and leaving evidence of his crimes. Despite his arrogance, police could not catch him. It wasn't until 2018 that the truth came out. Using genealogy databases, investigators linked DNA from the crime to John D. Miller, a man living just miles from where April disappeared. When questioned, Miller confessed. After 30 years of fear and unanswered questions, the case was finally closed. Number 1. In 1975, 17-year-old Sharon Prior left her home in Montreal to meet friends at a local pizza restaurant. She never arrived. Days later, her body was discovered in a wooded area. She had been abducted, assaulted, and murdered. The case haunted Montreal for decades. Generations of detectives searched for answers, but no suspect was ever identified. In 2023, almost 50 years later, DNA taken from Sharon's clothing was tested again with advanced technology. The results pointed to Frank Tremblay, a man who lived near Sharon at the time. Tremblay had died years earlier, but the DNA was undeniable. He was her killer. After nearly half a century, Sharon's family finally had closure. These stories remind us that even the coldest cases can be solved. A single strand of hair, a trace of blood, or a piece of clothing can hold the key to justice. Thanks to DNA technology, families who waited decades are finally getting the answers they deserve.